Okay, guys, welcome back to a new video here. So, Dave Smith and Douglas Murray, major podcast on Joe Rogan, where they had a pretty interesting debate. And listen, guys, I mean, I feel like Joe Rogan really, in terms of his content, I haven't been that interested in a lot of what he's been putting out there. I know a lot of other people had the same thing, but to give him credit, this was a very interesting debate, actually, kind of hosting two major different perspectives. And for the most part, he kind of just sit back and watched. He did intervene a couple times, basically, I would say defending Dave Smith in a couple of instances. It's very clear that he definitely sides more with Dave Smith ideologically. And in the beginning, Douglas Murray basically kind of attacked him and called him out, which is interesting because most of the guests on Joe Rogan do not do that in the slightest. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you the clips of that as well. And I thought, unlike everybody else, I thought it was a pretty nuanced debate. I think Douglas Murray had some good points on certain issues. I thought Dave Smith had really good points and destroyed Douglas on a number of other issues as well, which we're going to talk about. And I think one of the problems Douglas Murray was having is I think unfortunately he comes across as very smug in some aspects, which I think turns off a lot of viewers. And some of the claims he made, for example, that I thought was kind of ridiculous. Talking about Dave Smith, basically that you can't have an opinion on something because you weren't actually there. I think that was kind of ridiculous. Or if you're not credentialed, you can't have an opinion on something. Again, I just don't think he positioned and framed a lot of the issues and the arguments he was trying to make very well. But I did think, specifically in the beginning when he was calling out Rogan and some of the people he had on the show and the lack of pushback he would give them, I do think he got a couple of very good points in there. So we'll talk about that first. Here's the first clip of basically Joe Rogan getting called out by Douglas Murray for the people he puts on his platform and basically not calling it out at all. So here's the first clip, and we'll talk about it after.
No, I think authority matters. I think authority matters, and I think that if you just throw a lot of shit out there and then say I'm not interested in the alternative views on this, and particularly when it's a counter narrative that is wildly off. And when you get people, look, I just feel, we should get it out straight away, I feel you've opened the door to quite a lot of people who've now got a big platform who have been throwing out counter-historical stuff of a very dangerous kind.
You mean Daryl? Are you talking about Daryl?
Daryl, who's the other one?
I don't think Daryl has
Derek,
I don't think there's anything dangerous about
what's the other guy?
Daryl.
Derek, what's his name? Cooper, is it? Which one is it?
No, it's Daryl
Cooper. Who's the other one? There was one I just checked on the way here. Daryl Cooper, and then... Oh, yeah, Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll. Look, these guys are not historians. They're not knowledgeable about anything.
No one's calling Ian Carroll
No, but then why listen to their views on Churchill?
Daryl is incredibly knowledgeable.
He's not. He's wildly... Several reasons. One is, when he was offered to debate the current greatest living by...
View him as the chief villain is my hyperbolic, provocative statement. But
what's
Douglas,
the point of that?
Well, okay, but Pat Buchanan wrote an entire book on this. Is he not allowed? Is he not an expert? Is he not allowed to be interviewed?
He's certainly not an expert. He can be interviewed. I've watched Pat Buchanan debate. I watched Pat Buchanan debate against Churchill historians, and he was absolutely leveled because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
When did Pat Buchanan debate and get leveled?
About 20 years ago.
I'm just
He
curious.
debated against Andrew Roberts and several other historians at Intelligence Squared in London. I was there. He didn't know what he was talking about. He had a contrary view, and it was interesting and stimulating to hear. But if you only get the contrary view, which is, isn't it fun if we all pretend Churchill was the bad guy of the 20th century? At some point, you're going to lead people down a path where they think that's the view. And that's horseshit of the most profound kind.
I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
I think that's exactly what we're doing. And the problem is that because your own platform has come about because you're a very successful comedian and much more, and you do ask questions, and you are interested. But there are a lot of people who have come along, partly I think because they've come on this show, who have come along and they've decided, I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and, frankly, sometimes horrific opinions. And then if you say, that's wrong, they say...
Okay, and again, I think Douglas kind of might not be the best person to be saying this, but again, I do think the general point he's trying to make is absolutely correct, okay? His point is Rogan is having a bunch of people on, and he's not even checking them, and even in that clip, he's saying he hasn't said anything that crazy. Dave Smith also saying Daryl Cooper hasn't said anything that crazy. Guys, for example, one of the crazy things this guy, Daryl Cooper, said during the Paris Olympics when there was some sort of ceremony they did that a lot of people found offensive, and it was a picture of that. And then Daryl Cooper on social media posted pictures of Hitler in Germany saying this is preferable to what we have now. Posting pictures in France, just no context, on his social media, basically promoting this as if this is some sort of good thing. Yeah, that's pretty crazy to do something like that, and to say that's not a pretty fringe thing and this is just some normal person who's interested about history, it's ridiculous. And Rogan has had a bunch of people about this, and he doesn't really do that much pushback against them. So I do think that is a good point he's making, that Rogan is not giving any kind of pushback to a lot of these claims. And yeah, obviously people who care about the truth are going to be concerned about this. And a lot of these people talking about Churchill, basically saying Darryl Cooper said to Tucker Carlson, Churchill was a chief enemy of World War II. I can think of quite a few people who are worse than Winston Churchill, like Emperor Hirohito of Japan. I don't know, Benito Mussolini of Italy. I don't know, maybe Adolf Hitler. Like, it's just ridiculous. Again, there's obviously, when you're saying that frickin' Churchill was the chief enemy or the chief antagonist of World War II, that's just completely absurd. Okay, that's completely insane thing to say. And obviously, when you say stuff like that, what is the alternative that people think? It's very, again, they talk very, very suggestively as if, hey, maybe this Hitler guy wasn't so bad. This is what these people are kind of suggesting when they say Churchill is not, or Churchill was the chief enemy of World War II. It's ridiculous. Guys, by the way, make sure to like and subscribe. It's super good for the algorithm. We're right there at 500 subs, so hit that subscribe button. Patreon link and Amazon links are in the description as well, so make sure to check those out as well. And again, I think Douglas Murray made a couple of good points here, but again, I do think as the debate went on, Dave Smith just continued to hit him, specifically on Israel, where I think Dave Smith really kind of leveled him, to be completely honest with you. Douglas Murray, in my opinion, just does not show the sympathy for Palestinian civilians that a lot of people seem to have. And he said basically any criticism is anti-Semitic of the Israeli operation. I mean, that's kind of a major argument that Douglas Murray has been making. And yeah, people are going to be mad about the response from Israel into Palestine and into the Gaza Strip. Okay, people are going to be mad about what's been going on there. And I think Dave Smith missed a number of good points on that issue specifically, and we're going to talk about that. They also talk about Ukraine. Douglas Murray is very staunchly pro-Ukraine, and a lot of the talking points, for example, the 2014 the Ukrainian Maidan protests, were basically the Russian-backed puppet president was basically overthrown, and he fled to Russia afterwards. Okay, and they just say their argument, oh, it was a CIA coup. Because because the CIA put money into the protest. This is the argument from Dave Smiths of the world, and a lot of the people Joe Rogan's had on, but they don't actually talk about that. Wait a second, millions of people took to the streets in protest. Obviously, the Ukrainian people have agency here, okay? So I think it's another point Douglas Murray is correct on. But specifically on the Israeli-Palestinian issue, I think Dave Smith makes a number of good arguments where he basically levels Douglas Murray here, okay? I really think that. So we're going to talk about it after. Here's the clip, and we'll talk, and let me know what you guys think about this. Here's a clip. We'll talk about it after. Dave Smith and Douglas Murray on Gaza. Here's a clip.
Have agency, and I wish some of them had made better decisions. Now, many of them have made better decisions, and it's still resulted in nothing better happening for them and their people. And so I do find it kind of hard to lecture a group of people who are going through so much. Like, the level of human suffering that's being inflicted on the people of Gaza right now cannot be overstated. And so, to lecture them about how you're supposed to handle that exactly. But I will say, man, I think there's kind of this selective empathy that you have here. Like, I agree with you. Talk about these teenagers being slaughtered at a music festival on October 7th. It's like, my God, I have little kids. I can't imagine the nightmare of this happening to somebody's children. But at the same time, we're not having this conversation on October 9th or in November or December of 2023. We're having it in 2025, where the tragedy that's been inflicted on Gaza is orders of magnitudes greater than October 7th. There are just every day people are inundated with images of just dead women and children. This is one of the most brutal wars. And by several metrics that really, personally matter to me, like the number of dead kids, I think that's a pretty good one. It's more children have died than in any recent war. I mean, this is I do think there's almost a fundamental framing bias that you get into when people have these debates, and I've had several of them, as you have also. But it seems to me that there's almost an implicit difference in the value that you place on Israeli life versus the value that we place on Palestinians' life. And to even we've gone this far into the conversation and haven't even talked about the fact that Israel has, feel however you feel. If you want to argue, I haven't been there, stuff does get through the blockade. Okay, fine. This is a captive people. That Israel has dominated since at least 1967. Many of them are there because of the creation of the state of Israel, who used to live in what is now called Israel. And they are just, the amount of human suffering that's being inflicted on them, when, even as you kind of acknowledged with the George W. Bush exporting democracy, Hamas in many ways was forced on these people. In fact, we saw protests against Hamas just recently. So I don't know. That to me seems to be the greatest human tragedy. And I think much more so than you can characterize it as people being pro-Hamas or people being anti-Semitic. But I actually think that the mass movement around the world of people who oppose this war has been that people feel really awful about all these babies. And
Okay, and I think Dave Smith is absolutely correct here. And again, the way Douglas talks about it, again, he basically says, Dave Smith, your opinion doesn't really matter as much on the issue of Israel Palestine because you haven't even been there before. Which I think is kind of a silly, maybe even an elitist argument that because you haven't even been there, you can't have an opinion or talk about it a lot. I mean, people have eyes, people see videos of what's going on. And yeah, you're able to make valid criticisms of a foreign government's military operations that the US government is funding without actually being there. I think that's pretty obvious, but apparently guys like Douglas Murray, they don't understand this or they can't make that kind of point. So again, I think Dave Smith is absolutely correct. And the way Douglas Murray talks about it, it's hey, the Palestinian people, they elected Hamas and that's it. And Dave Smith's making the point, hey, the majority of the population is below the age of 18. Okay. That's pretty wild to say. So most of these people weren't even alive by the time Hamas was even elected into the power into the Gaza Strip. Okay. That's the argument that Dave Smith is trying to make here. But Douglas Murray is completely 100% won't criticize the Israeli government for anything, it seems. And Dave Smith is also making the point the Benjamin Netanyahu government actually supported Hamas. They funded and propped up Hamas in the Gaza Strip as a basically their logic and reasoning was, hey, they're such an extreme entity, it'll be impossible for the Palestinians to get a state with Hamas in charge in the Gaza Strip. But again, Douglas Murray doesn't really want to talk about this. He just talks about Qatar and how there's Qatari influence in the United States government. But that which is kind of funny given the amount of Israeli money going into the United States government as well. But he doesn't seem to have any sort of problems or qualms with that kind of framing of the argument. So I think on this issue specifically, Dave Smith makes a number of good points. And Douglas Murray, I don't think the audience is going to come away saying, yeah, Douglas Murray beat Dave Smith on this point objectively. And yeah, I do agree with Dave Smith. Most people protesting this, they're actually just concerned about what's going on in the Gaza Strip, the amount of civilian lives lost. I think that's you're able to criticize that without being anti-Semitic, which is kind of what Douglas Murray is implying, or you're stupid if you disagree, which I think is also kind of a stupid thing to say, to be completely honest with you. But I think Dave Smith makes a number of good arguments on that point. It was an interesting debate, guys. I mean, you guys should really check it out if you have the time. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Agree with me, disagree with me. Want a wide audience. So that's what I got today. Make sure to like and subscribe again. Super good for the algorithm. So close to 500 subs. So hit that subscribe button. Patreon and Amazon links are in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later.